think that the media cartel, this monopoly we've got, has to be a primary focus, because they've given this megaphone to this minority, this crazy minority, and their own polls show you that it's a minority, and yet we don't know it. So we have to become aware of that, and we have to use that to energize us, to fight it. And the media, from the media's position, this is not about whether people get health care or not. It's all sort of a game. And when you talk to Congress members, they follow the media so closely that they play the same games. So I asked Congresswoman Sutton on Labor Day morning up in Barberton, Ohio, what she thought of the Weiner Amendment and the Kucinich Amendment, and why she sponsored single-payer health care, John Conyers' Bill 676 in the last Congress, but not in this one, when it actually might make a difference. Right? And she told me, oh, well, I can do more in committee if I'm not sponsoring a good bill, which makes absolutely no sense. And she didn't attempt to make it make any sense. It was just a line. But then she said the Weiner Amendment. This is going to be a vote coming up. They're going to have a floor vote in the House on national single payer. She said, this is going to be the big one. This is the focus. This is the big vote, because she's going to vote yes. And she insisted just as adamantly that it's going to fail. As all observers predict, it's going to fail. And so the real big focus is the one that's going to fail. And then I asked her about the Kucinich Amendment, which is already in the bill, unless they unceremoniously, undemocratically strip it out. Well, it's in one of the three bills they're combining, and there's no reason that any of the two, neither of the other bills has anything to do with it that could conflict with it in any way. And she said, oh, well, I don't think that's as important as some people think. I don't think that really makes any difference. And all she can have possibly meant by that was, it's not in the media. Nobody in the corporate media is talking about it. Because the bill that she admits is going to fail is her big focus. The bill that she thinks might pass, with or without the public option, which might be construed to be the public option that kicks in 5 years later, after everybody's demobilized and the lobbyists have fixed everything, that bill has got something in it that would allow the state of Ohio and the state of California and the state of Pennsylvania and the state of states across the country to do single payer. Very, very plausible, very, very feasible. And there's a bill in the Ohio State Legislature. And yet she thinks that's unimportant because we haven't got the media to talk about it. So they play the same games, and it comes out of the media. Last Congress, you know, they like to talk about health care too. They like to play games with us about health care in the Congress. And Rahm Emanuel's strategy, which he told the Washington Post in the beginning of '07, as some of you will recall, was to keep the wars going, to keep Bush and Cheney around. We're going to want them around come 2008. We're going to want the wars going in 2008. But focus on some things like children's health care. Like let's put up a bill to get children health care. Never mind that we know it's going to be vetoed. We're going to introduce the bill, talk a lot about it, about how we want children to get health care, and then have it vetoed. Because we aren't interested in impeaching the guy and then passing a bill and having it become law. This time, they're interested in talking about universal health care of some sort, of some compromised variety, which they wouldn't do in '07, '08. And yet, they have another trick in their back pocket again. This time, it's not that they won't impeach anybody, it's that they won't throw out the filibuster. And as long as they have the filibuster excuse around, the Democrats can blame the Republicans, apparently even though the Democrats have a filibuster-proof majority, or would if Kennedy is replaced and so on. They're right there. And this is a rule. It's not in the Constitution. I don't know what Mr. Beck thinks. It's not in the Bible. You can read the entire book. You will not find the word filibuster. Yet it's simply a rule. It's just a rule. 51 senators could throw it out tomorrow. And keeping it in place allows senators who represent 12% of us to block all legislation in the Senate and all legislation in the House. The Democrats are very open about the fact that they want to keep it around for when the Republicans are back in charge, so that the Democrats have an anti-democratic tool to use against the Republicans. Should the Republicans, of all things, want to do something that the majority of Americans want, the Democrats will be able to stop them. But by doing this, by playing only defense all the time, even when the Republicans have been completely voted out of power, they are in fact guaranteeing that the Republicans will be back in power. Right? This is defense to the absence of any offense, self-destructive. Right? It's almost like if people started bringing guns to your speeches and you let them. I mean, is this sort of defensiveness? Like you're too afraid to lock them up because you might be accused of taking people's guns away or something. So you play defense to the point of risking your life or your career or what you're supposedly elected to do. This is what they're about. So I think we have to start by reforming the media. We have to bust the monopolies. We have to create independent and public media. We have to, I think, with any medium that is widespread, like the internet, like satellite TV, we have to make it free to everyone, everywhere in the country. We have to provide it as a right, as a resource. And I think we have to recognize not just this particular book, but books as a key medium now, and bookstores like this one as a key media outlet. I have learned more breaking news from books in the past 5 years than from newspapers. Many stories that then show up in newspapers, many that don't ever show up in newspapers. You'll remember when the New York Times broke the spying story that they'd sat on for over a year because it might have influenced an election. God forbid, we know our government's spying on us before we go to an election. And they only broke the story because the reporter was finally putting it out in a book, which contained 6 other stories they have yet to break. So read books and support these kind of bookstores. But don't do this. Don't gather together thousands of Obama supporters and 400 former Obama staffers and raise $100,000 and buy a giant ad in the New York Times, as was done today. This is an encouraging thing because this is Obama supporters saying, wait just a goddamn minute, what are you doing? Are you doing what we worked for? It's an encouraging thing, right? People are getting around to the attitude they should have had in November, right? Not because there's anything wrong with Obama, but because this, let's sit back and see what happens, is not a democratic attitude. That should follow a coup, not an election. Following an election, you get out there and tell them what you want them to do to represent you, because we are in a representative republic. Obama will tell you himself. He'll quote Franklin Roosevelt. It's coming around now, and that's encouraging. These are people who are ready to be independent, not party-controlled citizens of this country, but they don't know how. They don't have a clue how. So they fund the enemy. They fund the New York Times to the tune of $100,000, right? And they do it to ask for a savior. Rather than going and talking to their Congress members, rather than funding an independent activist group, a progressive group, Progressive Democrats of America, or take your pick of the dozens of good national and local groups, and then putting out a press statement and a conference on why they're doing it, why they're putting their resources now into independent activism rather than AstroTurf groups and the corporate media. They fund an institution that destroys everything they want every day. And they could advertise in good media, right? And then you get the argument, oh, well, but the good media only reaches the people in this room. But it doesn't if you fund it and it grows. If you fund it and it grows, it reaches more and more people. If you fund the New York Times, then it continues to reach more people, right? And this, again, this is one where we can agree with the Glenn Becks of the world. Nobody likes the New York Times.
I like the New York Times.
Okay, we'll talk about the New York Times. It's good to have disagreement. But if you are going to work for peace, and you are going to take out full-page ads for tens of thousands of dollars in a newspaper without which we would not have had this war. You've got to at least think about what you're doing.